Next, we're going to talk about so-called circular societies. Before we do that, let's make a quick recap of the circular economy that we talked about in the previous lectures. So instead of having and following the model of a linear economy that was essentially just take, make, dispose, we proposed an alternative economic systems that is dominated by circularity of resources and goods and services. So you take resources, extract them from the environment, you use them to make a product, but instead of then just using it and throwing it away, you try to keep it in the life cycle for as long as possible, using approaches like reuse and repair and sharing to maximize utilization of the product, or to refurbish and remanufacture, and only if all of those are not suitable anymore, we think about recycle and recover, thereby giving all the resources back into the cycle. We also talked about a special subcategory of the circular economy, which is the performance economy that deals with selling results instead of goods. So we had this example of a drilling machine. Instead of owning the drilling machine, you are just purchasing drilled holes, and then essentially then satisfies your needs for a hole. You never had a need for a drilling machine, you just wanted the hole to be drilled. So to briefly summarize the goals of the circular economy once more, you want to keep the resources that you have extracted in a loop for as long as possible. You also want to minimize the discharge of substances that are harmful to health and nature. You have the idea of keeping the products that you have produced in the cycle for as long as possible, and also keeping them at the highest quality for as long as possible. This is true for products as well as for resources. And in the context of the performance economy, we also talked about increasing or maximizing the utilization of resources, especially in the context of financial gains, so that we have this combination of maximizing and exploiting sufficiency, but as also like efficiency solutions at the same time. But as good as all of this sounds, the circular economy and the performance economy also have some disadvantages, or at least some shortcomings that need to be addressed. So when we are replacing the linear economy with the circular economy as presented before, we mostly focus on the business aspects of these economic systems. So we're just trying to replace a linear system with a circular system that is still mostly focused on consumption and production. So we're still interested in selling as many holes as possible without asking the question, how many holes do we really need per year? The business model is still selling as much as possible and consume as much as possible. And the circular economy also focuses mostly on earned value management. So in German it's Wertschöpfungsmanagement, product service systems, product and business model innovations within existing power asymmetries. So if you look at a product that is built, you often, in economic terms, talk about the value earned or the value added or the value used. And that is definitely true. Like when you have resources, you make them into a product. This product has a higher value than the original resources because it hopefully gives you some kind of utilization, some value that you can use. So in the upper part of the figure, you can see that from the start, the value first heavily increases, and then when the product is used, it starts to decrease a little bit until it hits a point where the product cannot be used anymore, and then the value more or less drops to a certain point. So the longer you have something over the time axis, value goes down. But all the value added also has a downside that is often not really considered. For example, where are the resources coming from? Are there maybe conflict resources? Even in a circular economy, we have discharge of certain substances that harm the environment. And even in a circular economy, you often use virgin resources that first have to be extracted from the environment, thereby doing a certain damage. You have emissions in the production of things and systems. You have emissions during the use. You have some discharge from things that cannot be recycled. And all this socio-ecological damage is often outsourced or not really considered when you talk about the value added. And this is very much true also in the circular economy. And finally, the circular economy is just trying to decouple economic growth more and the consumption of natural resources. So we still want infinite growth we just don't want to use more resources because we figured out, oh, this is bad for our survival. But the underlying assumption is still sell as much as possible. And that leads to the question, why do we need never-ending economic growth? Why do we want to believe in this fairy tale that doesn't seem to be necessary anymore? Why is it good to consume as many goods and services as possible? What's the motivation behind that? And this is pretty much what circular economy doesn't answer, and something that the circular societies question. So what could be alternatives to pursue? So we can look at sufficiency strategies and lifestyle changes, question the prevailing entrepreneurial orientation towards the shareholder concept, and also there's an aspect of deconstructing existing power and hegemonic relations. And this is pretty much what circular societies try to do, but we'll also look into different alternative models in subsequent lectures. So now that we have motivated the need for something that goes beyond the circular economy, and circular societies could fit that category, let's have a closer look at what circular societies are. First and foremost, and very important before we continue, is that a circular society is not just a circular economy plus some social stuff. It goes way beyond that and is also more holistic. Part of circular societies is this idea of socio-political transformation and reorganization of society, and also the goal to replace intransparent and inequity-based value change of the linear economy, but also the circular economy, with more democratic, transparent, and cooperatively organized value change. So it's not just I want the most for me, but it's rather this idea of how can we solve problems that we have as a society together so that everyone benefits. So instead of having one or two people with 200 billions running the most part of the economy, you try to make the most for society, for all people in the community. It also has a goal of preserving the environment and resources for present and future generations and enable social participation and allow for some quality of life. So it's not just this maintain resources and keep them at the highest quality, but also for the people living on this planet, making sure that they have very high quality of life. Because what's the point of everything in your, like if you have high quality and purity of resources, but your life sucks, what's the point? And that goes hand in hand with the democratization of the value creation process in itself. So instead of having a few who own or operate or have the power over everything, having this more social economic approach for societies and different stakeholder groups to make this a system that serves society and not just a few. And as usual, the proper definition of these circular societies is in addition to this more intuitive explanation before. A circular society defines discourses with a vision of circularity, where not only resources are circulated in sustainable loops, but also wealth, knowledge, technology, and power is circulated and redistributed throughout a society. So circular economy very much focused on the first part, and now we're adding further concepts here to get it to a more holistic solution. So in short, the circular economy is more the market-based solutions and economic considerations, while the circular society has circularity as a holistic social transformation concept.